Welcome to Lose Yourself to Films. This is Road to the Odyssey, a series where I'll be revisiting Christopher Nolan's films from the very beginning, looking for the ideas, themes, and pieces of Nolan DNA that would eventually define his career and ultimately lead us to the Odyssey. Every master of their craft starts somewhere, and Christopher Nolan is no exception. So, next up on the Road to the Odyssey, the Dark Knight Trilogy, Part 2. Released between 2005 and 2012, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy became one of the most defining superhero trilogies in cinema. And instead of covering each film individually, I decided to combine the trilogy. Because after revisiting all three films, I noticed so many of Nolan's recurring themes and ideas evolve across Bruce Wayne's journey as Batman. So let's jump back into the Nolan DNA we've been tracking throughout this series. Fear is one of the central ideas that the entire trilogy is built on. After witnessing the murder of his parents, Bruce spends years trying to overcome the fear that's controlled him for most of his life. One of my favorite parts of the film is when he confronts Carmine Falcone. Bruce tells him he's not afraid of him, but Falcone sees right through him, telling Bruce, "This is a world you don't understand, and you always fear what you don't understand." I believe that conversation is Bruce's turning point. Wanting to understand the criminal world, he leaves Gotham and spends years living amongst thieves and criminals, a journey that eventually leads him to Henry Ducard and the League of Shadows. His training with Henry Ducard isn't about eliminating fear, it's about understanding it and learning how to use it. Bruce ultimately embraces fear as part of his identity, and with Batman becomes the symbol that criminals fear. Scarecrow, on the other hand, represents fear in the most literal form, using his fear toxin to exploit people's deepest fears and psychologically breaking them. By The Dark Knight, Batman has turned fear into one of his greatest weapons. Criminals fear the Batman's presence long before they ever see him. The Joker, however, uses fear in a completely different way. Rather than striking fear into criminals, he pushes the boundaries of Gotham and its people by proving that with just a little chaos, even the most moral person can be broken. Through moments like Harvey Dent's fall and the fairy experiment, the Joker creates fear through chaos and uncertainty, believing that fear will eventually cause people to abandon their principles and become something they'd never imagined. And by The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce's greatest enemy is no longer Bane, it's his own fear. While trapped in the pit, he repeatedly fails to escape because he climbs with the safety of the rope. Only when he removes it and accepts the possibility of death, does he finally make the impossible climb. By embracing fear instead of avoiding it, Bruce finally becomes the hero Gotham needs one last time. So across the trilogy, Nolan shows that fear isn't something to eliminate, it's something to understand, confront, and ultimately overcome. Another theme Nolan continues exploring is moral ambiguity. The Dark Knight Trilogy rarely presents clear-cut right and wrong answers, and it's honestly one of my favorite parts of the trilogy because it creates so many discussions amongst fans. In Batman Begins, Bruce refuses to execute a prisoner for the League of Shadows because it goes against everything he believes. Yet later, when confronting Ra's al Ghul on the train, Bruce chooses not to save him, famously saying, "I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you." It's one of the first moments where Nolan begins to blur the line between doing what's right and doing what's necessary. In The Dark Knight, these moral dilemmas become even more complicated. Batman secretly uses Lucius Fox's sonar surveillance system to find the Joker, sacrificing the privacy of the entire city to stop one man. The decision is so extreme that Fox questions whether he can continue working with Bruce, telling him that if the machine stays, he leaves. In the end, Bruce has Fox destroy it. At the same time, Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face shows how even Gotham's greatest heroes can lose his moral compass under the right circumstances. The Joker constantly creates impossible moral dilemmas throughout the film, but none are bigger than the fairy experiment, where one boat carrying prisoners and another carrying civilians must decide whether they're willing to kill the other in order to survive. And by the end of the film, Batman chooses to take responsibility for Harvey's crimes, allowing Gotham to continue believing in its White Knight while becoming the city's most wanted. In The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce is forced to confront the consequences of the lie he and Gordon created to protect Harvey Dent's image. That lie brings peace to Gotham, but it's built on a falsehood. It also leads to the Dent Act, a law that allows hundreds of criminals to remain imprisoned without the possibility of parole, sacrificing individual rights in the name of public safety. In conclusion, throughout the trilogy, Nolan constantly challenges the audience to ask whether doing the right thing always means making the morally correct choice. Perhaps the biggest theme across the trilogy is legacy. In Batman Begins, Bruce creates Batman to become a symbol of hope for a city that has forgotten what hope looks like. One of my favorite moments is when Batman is scaling a building and runs into a young boy, and instead of leaving him with fear, he leaves him with hope, reassuring him that everything will be okay. By the end of the film, that same kid is completely convinced Batman will come back to save him when he and Rachel are trapped by the escaped inmates, and Batman does. Right from the very beginning, Batman becomes more than just Bruce Wayne. He becomes a symbol people believe in. By The Dark Knight, the symbol has become bigger than Bruce Wayne himself. Batman sacrifices his own reputation so Harvey Dent's legacy can survive. Believing Gotham needs inspiration more than it needs truth. He tells Gordon to call it in and let the police hunt him down, if it means preserving Harvey's image. By the end of the film, Batman becomes more than just Batman. He becomes the Dark Knight. Finally, in The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce realizes Batman was never meant to last forever. By trusting others to carry on the mission and allowing Gotham to move forward without him, he proves that symbols can outlive the people who create them. After Gotham believes Batman sacrifices himself to save the city, they build a statue in his honor. Bruce also ends up leaving Wayne Manor to the city's orphan children, ensuring his legacy extends beyond Batman. And what might be my favorite ending throughout the trilogy comes at the end of this film, when Blake explores the Batcave. We see the floor rising, and it blacks out the screen, and it's clear that Gotham will always have someone watching over it, leaving the Batman legacy. Across all three films, Nolan transforms Batman from a man driven by revenge into a symbol defined by hope, sacrifice, and legacy. The trilogy ultimately asks not who Batman is, but what Batman leaves behind. So yeah, the Dark Knight Trilogy did a lot for Christopher Nolan. It also helped redefine what a superhero movie could be by grounding it in real-world themes and moral questions that audiences are still talking about today. Next stop on the road to the Odyssey, The Prestige. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe as we continue exploring Christopher Nolan's journey from independent filmmaker to one of cinema's most influential directors. Thanks for watching.